So welcome to this session. We're going to talk about, there's a lot to cover in 20 minutes. We're going to talk about what are the sort of things that you need to think about when you're asking for money, when you're pitching, looking for partnerships. The thing here is that, well, who likes selling? Do you like asking for money? It's hard. And when you're talking about innovation and ideas, you've got an idea, you build it out, you pilot it, you then ask for money, execute, hard work, come back for more money, execute. And so the asking for money and partnerships and funding what you're doing is constant. And we've got Deepa, who you've met, and Simon Freeman from Judith Neilson Foundation to tackle some of the questions around what are the things that you need to think about in this space of funding and asking for money. We're going to cover differences between philanthropic asks and corporate asks. And also, how do you handle knockbacks and how do you handle the challenges around this space? So Deepa, you've already heard about, but it'd be worthwhile, Deepa, for those that are new, just to quickly introduce yourself. Deepa's the corporate affairs and communications lead for, I think, half of the world for P&G.
Yes. I mean, now you already said it. Now stole my thunder. But yeah, so I lead corporate affairs for Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa, P&G. A large part of my work has been, like I talked about, work around gender equality, but also corporate social responsibility, particularly in India, Middle East, and Africa.
Simon Freeman, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I kind of got into this game a bit accidentally. I was running the family office for Paul Ramsey and then ended up being the first CEO of the Ramsey Foundation. My current gig, working for Judith Neilson. I've been there about 4 years. Judith's always done a lot of stuff philanthropically, but she wanted a strategy put around that, so that's what I've been doing. Judith's committed to spending down over the next 50 years, and we're currently working in Australia and Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you. So the format of this session is a bit like some questions to warm up these guys, but then really questions from you. As a member of the board of the Global Citizen, I'm really passionate about arming the young generation with the right tools and capabilities to go in and talk to the sorts of folks that you see in front of you. So scan the QR code and put your questions through, and hopefully I can read them from somewhere. But just to get you started, maybe tell us about what a really memorable, great pitch was, and perhaps some of the not so great pitches and what wasn't so good about them. So I might get you to go Deepa first.
Okay, sure. So, in P&G specifically, I mean, different private sectors work slightly differently, but in P&G, the work that we do around community impact and corporate social responsibility is really baked into the business. So the business is the one that kind of makes the decisions, they enable with the budget, and that's how they move forward. Now, as part of this, we get a significant number of people who come and talk to us about, the work that they'd like us to help them with. And in India, we have a program that we've been running now for 15 years called P&G Shiksha. Shiksha means education in Hindi. And it's really about children's education. So about 20 years back, we said, hey, this is what consumers care about, and this is what we want to focus on. And we started working with different schools and kind of funding them to provide children's education. We realized, and I remember, so now the conversation about the best pitch, right? I remember having a conversation with someone from a foundation at that point. And I remember he spoke to me about, and he made me look at children's education in a completely different way. He talked to me about things like learning outcomes. He told me things about, what we found is, we were investing in some schools, we were donating to certain schools, but we found that, the enrollment of children was very high, but the reality is the children were actually not going into the school. And we realized, and this is what he helped me see, he realized that actually it was a lack of infrastructure. So some of the schools were under a tree. They're schools, but they were under a tree. Some of the schools were over a river that didn't have kind of a bridge for the children to actually get there, or there wasn't a road. So we started actually investing in infrastructure. That's one of the things we did. Then after we did this whole infrastructure piece, the other thing he said to me was that actually there aren't really learning outcomes. So you have all the children in the school, now they're going into the school, but they're actually not learning. We found that kids in grade 3, were not able to do grade 1 type of work. Kids in grade 5 were not able to do grade 2 curriculum. And we realized is that a large part of the Right to Education Act in India actually starts from age 6, which means that the first time many children are actually holding a pencil, which is, by the way, very important, right? Holding a pencil, it was when they were 6 years old, right? So the reality is they had no access to early childhood education, right? Which helps you set up your stage for, getting into grade 1. So that's another piece of work that we eventually did. And he introduced us to different organizations that do work in these different spaces. And that really led to us really revamping the way we did the work that we did around PNG Shiksha. So that's an example of someone really telling us something we didn't know and helping us really get to the right impact from a magnitude point of view and from a systemic change point of view. Now, there have been many bad pitches. So I was just telling Terence that, do I really need to talk about the bad pitches? There are so many. He was like, talk about one. I was like, how many? But let me tell you what, the fundamental, what is common around all the bad pitches is that, when people come to us and ask us for support, they come with just a very sole agenda. So they haven't really understood what we care about, what are the causes we care about. They haven't really understood some of the work that we've done. They've really not understood what our business needs, and they come in with just one agenda. And that never works for us, right? Because then we're also, sometimes we don't have really great imagination. I know we say we do, but we don't. And so sometimes we can't really imagine what the outcome might look like, right? Because they're only coming in with their agenda, and we don't understand how that sort of integrates back with us. And that's what I would say would be common with most bad pitches.
Thank you, Deepa. Simon, how about you?
I think one of the best I ever got was one where the guy that was pitching to me for the money was just so humble, and he was so honest and open about what the challenges that he was facing. As it happened, he really knew his stuff about impact. He knew about the outcomes that he was looking for. He had the buy-in of government. This was a Tasmania-based program and the education system there. And he had strong local leadership on board. And he was just so open about the challenges that he was facing that we just bought into him as a leader. And, it was just, his humility when he was presenting to us. So not over-prepared, didn't have all the answers, asked as many questions of us as we asked of him. And we're really all about building those relationships. I think I've also had many bad ones. I think if I was just to give advice about the bad things, I guess having done your research before you approach us and making sure that you're relevant and on pitch for what we're looking for would be a great start. I get a lot of LinkedIn emails. I've got to be honest with you, 95% of them never lead to anything. And we recognise that there's a massive power imbalance here. And we just try and be honest and upfront with people as much as possible. But I think also equally, we ask that people have done a bit of research on us.
That's a really good segue into my next question. So I've got these 4 R's around what you need to do or what might be useful in asking for money. The first one being relationships, and maybe they're important, maybe they're not, or referrals. The reputation of your organisation in the space that you're looking to work in. The rationale for the ask, i.e. is there a strategic link here between what you do and what the strategy is? And have you done the research, which Simon referred to? Have you done the research to be able to go in and talk eloquently and not fumble? So the 4 R's around pitching. What are your sort of thoughts around those? Do you agree that they're the most important bits, and which are more important than others?
So relationships, least important, in my opinion. I think the other 3, which is reputation, rationale, and research, did I get that right? Yeah. I think are the 3 most important. And again, in terms of reputation, so I just want to kind of double-click on each of them, right? In terms of reputation, I think reputation is what's been the history but also how have you measured it? And I think measurement is really important because the more you measure, the more things get done, the more things are acknowledged, the more they get reported, and that fuels more investment in the future, right? So really understanding what has been the track record, and then also how do you plan to measure the impact. We receive too many requests from folks that don't actually tell us what happened, and I've been burnt before, right? They don't necessarily tell us, or we don't actually see what's been the outcome or the impact of the, what we've invested in. In terms of rationale, there has to be a connection back with our business needs, right? So, I mean, we talked about, really good pitches, is people who really understand three things. One is, what are the tangible community needs? What does the community actually need in order to create change that's long-lasting? We're not interested in sort of flash-in-the-pan type of projects, right? The second is really understanding what are the business needs and how they intersect. And I think that becomes extremely important. And the third is understanding what's really the expertise of that NGO, what are the thematic areas that they're working in that sort of sync back with this. People need to come in with the approach of being collaborative so that they can work together in a mutual partnership. And then the last is research. You're absolutely right. Just do your research. Understand what we're interested in. Speak to us in the language that we want to hear, because that creates pull versus push. And the moment you get people, so like the example that I told you about, that amazing pitch, is that there was pull. I wanted to know more. What's your disruptive insight? What do you know? How can we be better? But how can we do better so that we reach the outcomes that make sense for these three things that I talked about?
Yeah, no, that's really important. And I think you and I were talking about relationships before, and so if another corporate listens to a pitch and goes, no, actually, you should be talking to Deepa, that might be a solid referral, right?
Yeah, that would be a solid referral. And yes, we were also talking about what I do not like is people saying, hey, I know someone, so talk to them. Because then, I'll talk to them. But at that point, I haven't really necessarily got the pull, right? Because they've not come in with the disruptive insight. But if there's somebody else who's also reputed and has done this work, and then, like you said, refers them to me saying, hey, this is the kind of work that, Deepa's interested in doing in P&G, then I'd be I'd be open to kind of seeing what this is about, because this person knows more than I do, versus I know someone who knows someone. That happens a lot in India, unfortunately.
Simon, what's your take on it? I think relationships are important, but I don't think they're everything. Yeah. I think we're as funders, as I said before, we've got a real power imbalance. So we really need to be mindful, not just funding the people that you like and get on with, right? Because it's all about being different and disruptive around that. But to the question of what makes a really good pitch, it's why us, understanding why you want the Judith Neilson Foundation on board, and why now, understanding your approach and why you think your approach is more impactful and the impact that it's going to have, and demonstrating and underpinning that with an understanding of community, of people with lived experience, and all of those things.
Thank you, Simon. So I haven't seen any questions pop up, so I've got one more question. I can keep chatting. We've got about 7 minutes, so if you've got questions, pop them into the QR code Slido, I think. So next question, and given...
Has there been a QR code given? I don't know.
I think it's the one on the back of your tag.
Okay.
No? Okay. Well, maybe if you've got questions, put your hand out, and we can...
We do it the old school way.
Okay, so I'm going to come to you. I'm going to ask one quick question, and then get your hands up. I've got 1, 2, 3. All right. No, you know what? We're not going to get through. So let's go with the questions. Over here.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
But maybe it makes sense for you to just use the mic. I can hand it over to you.
Yeah, we'll share this one.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Chamatya Fernando from Sri Lanka, one of the Youth Leaders Award winners. I think for young people, especially advocating for so many changes, resourcing is one aspect that we really struggle with. But for me, at least working for the last 10 years in that space, for me, the biggest challenge has been the stigma, the pushback for youth advocates, young people working on matters that really affect us, and a lot of struggles, challenges to kind of get through, not just the decision makers, but even to the communities, because of, the word gender or sex itself has so much of taboo and, pushback in the community. I also come from a global movement, Girl Guides, Girl Scouts, I'm sure you all have heard, and it has been a real struggle. We are the largest voluntary movement dedicated for girls and young women, with 9 million in 153 countries, but getting funding or resourcing has been an extremely challenging role. What do you think has been, because we've been approaching so many foundations, corporates to kind of collaborate, and we've been open to, and there are very few who have been really supportive and forthcoming. What do you think we should be doing differently, or what we should be really looking at pitching our proposals, especially because we have a lot of youth-led work happening at the grassroots level, because we are directly working with girls and young women. So that's my...
Thank you. Simon.
It's really disappointing to hear your experience, to be honest with you, but we solely work around women and girls in Australia, and we have a very strong gender lens with the international work that we do in Africa. I think all the advice that I can really give you is keep going. I hope attitudes are changing. I feel like with the generational shift that we're seeing in philanthropy, that will change. But honestly, for us, when we work overseas and we're looking at return on investment, women and girls is pretty much the safest bet there is out there.
Thank you, Simon.
I mean, I could just add on to that, if you don't mind, is that I think it's important to talk about early wins. Okay, so, and I think that one of the big issues currently when you have conversations like this is everybody's expecting a perfect solution. It does not exist. And I think when you start talking to people, you need to start talking to them to develop your credibility. You need to start talking about small things. There was this problem, I solved this, right? And then that sort of develops your credibility, and you tell the stories of the people that you've impacted, because the more personal you make it, the easier it is for someone to engage in the discussions.
Thank you, Deepa. I've got a question out there.
Me?
Yep. Whoever's got the
There's
mic.
a lot of hands. Hi, my name's Brianna. I have ran a social enterprise for 5 years and I guess had some really early success with philanthropy, but I find it interesting because when you're in your early stages, it's really quite a black box. And I found you've mentioned a power imbalance between people in the early stages and people that are in positions with money. I'd like to get more of an insight into, I guess, how foundations or family offices or whatever they are strategically redressing that power imbalance, and what do you do to ensure that it's not just network and relations based, but everyone can have access to these pools of money.
Thank you, Brianna. Simon, for you.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question. For us, it's always a struggle between balancing the number of people that we have in our organisation and our ability to go and take as many meetings as we can. So we do need to put in place some kind of filter around that. We increasingly have opportunities for people to come and approach us through expressions of interest. So you can, for example, shoot me an email on LinkedIn if you think that you're a good fit. We're always open to those conversations, and we always try and go into conversations with an open mind and a willingness to accept those conversations. But I totally understand your pain. I don't have all the answers to it, I'm afraid.
We've got lots of questions, and these guys are going to be around. We're going to go in for morning tea, so come and ask your questions because I've been given the signal to wrap up. Firstly, thank you for your insights. I changed all the questions this morning, and I think the guys were sweating, but they've done wonderfully well. So thank you, Simon and Deepa. To the audience, you guys are our future. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you've got more questions, we're all around during morning tea. So please give Deepa and Simon an acknowledgement.